Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest Bryan.
Hi, everyone. I am that gal. I'm Lorianne from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I am with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas, and we would like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we're really pleased to have Bryan, and he is the Director of Innovation and Research, and he's also the Senior Interior Designer at M&A Architects. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yes.
My pleasure.
So, Mark, I was involved in construction. I was a project manager for electrical contracting company, so I'm familiar with architects and architecture. One thing that in your bio is interesting to me is, when COVID started, everybody started working from home. So I know now here in Dallas, there's a big glut of office space, warehouse space, and all this. Now, a lot of those are being converted into condos. That's kind of the trend here in Dallas, is a lot of these office buildings, they're making them into condos. So what is your projection for the future?
So the future of the workplace is definitely a very hot topic right now. A lot of people are on this for the very reason that you brought up, Roy, and that people are trying to figure out if they need to downsize, if they need to still bring people into the office. What does that look like? What's important to the employees? And so the things that we are tracking in the research that we're looking into is that people still need space, especially from a workplace standpoint. People still need to be able to come into a place where they can connect with others. There's a lot of research and data out there that actually says that people who are more engaged are 12% more likely to be, or 12% more productive in their work. And a lot of the data at work from home works if you have a heads down work that you need to do. What doesn't work is if you're also trying to manage a family, if you're also trying to manage, if you're running a business from your home and you don't have that home office where you can still be siloed off. And so that's the other reason why people still want to come into the office. So I think overall, what we're projecting is more of this hybrid cultural center model where people still can come into the office. They can have that engagement with the company, with the core values. They can have engagement with others. It's a place to have meetings. It's a place where if you do need to get away from your family, you can come and do so. But a lot of companies are shifting the office to be more of an amenity-based situation where it is like you can have the gym as part of your amenities. You can have, maybe there's a daycare center that's nearby. It really just depends on what the company's values are. And that's the big thing, is that they want to make sure that the space that they're creating is aligned with their mission and their values. Because a lot of people are moving away from ROI, the return on investment, to more VOI, the value of investment. And so I think we're going to see a lot of shifts in what is happening in the space, but I'm not so sure we're going to see a shrinkage in space. Now, you will see companies who are going to, like you said, they're turning them into condos. I've done some of the signals that I've seen for future forecasts really talk about vertical farming and vertical farming taking over into an office space. And so I think that's an interesting way, of thinking about what that means for our agriculture industry and our sectors. So yes, there are going to be some changes that holistically, they may not need their office, but they're going to find that they're probably going to need a co-working situation or some kind of other hub that they can take people to have that engagement.
Would you think that say a company that goes in and puts in office suite, say you can have access to a boardroom, you could have access to a lab or whatever. So in other words, they come in and rent that space instead of owning a building that has all that in it. I know one of my sons was working for AT&T, and since COVID, they've decided to get rid of a bunch of their real estate. Mm-hmm. People are working from home because they said, we don't need all of this. We found out that people working from home are productive. They can be. Of course, they monitor them pretty good, but anyway, but they're getting rid of a lot of their real estate. And is that a trend you think is going to continue?
Yes, and I will say that, yes, people can be productive from home. I think the unfair thing about that if when you're taking metrics off of that during a pandemic, is there's a lot of forced productivity and where people were having a lot of fear and anxiety of losing their jobs. And so they were maybe working twice as much in order to get the production that they needed done. And so I just want to throw that as a cautionary tale that I don't think that it's 100% fair to say that somebody can be always 100% productive when they work from home without what you're talking about. Because yes, I definitely think that you're going to see a lot of more major corporations that are going to be shifting to, they may not need as much real estate and they may need more like satellite offices. And so we talk about it in terms of these hub and spokes. So you have the hub where the cultural center would be, where people come in for a lot of their primary engagements, but they may have more of these colony spaces that are on outliers. They could be at a coffee shop. They could be at a co-working facility where people come in and rent out a conference room, rent out, like you said, a lab space. It's actually funny because one of the articles that I read was talking about how lab spaces and then co-living are going to be used to like fuel each other in the future. So co-living is where you might rent a room that has your bedroom and maybe like a small kitchenette space and then a living area, but then all of your other amenities are out in the shared space where you would have communal access to it. And so by having that paired with a lab space allows it to be more of a profitable venture. So I definitely think you're going to see a lot of these blending of uses in order to serve people. I think we're coming to more of the age of this agile working, or choice-based working, where depending on what your needs are, that's what we need to be able to be providing when we're designing office spaces, or what employers need to be providing, because we're diving much more into things like neurodiversity and into what accessibility and disability means to a person, down to color blindness and down to like, other visual acuity issues that people may have. So we're trying to dive into like the two sides of a person, where one is, yes, what you do at the office, but then the other side is like what your personal needs are in order for you to be your whole self, your best self when you come into the office.
So with COVID, let's use it as a point. In future design, is it going to be designed so that for protection of things in the future? You know what I mean?
I do, yes. So I should clarify. So I am a certified futurist. And so one of the things that I do is I look for signals in drivers. And so the drivers are the big forces that are causing shifts, whatever the topic may be. So this would be like workplace. And so the pandemic would be a driver. And then signals are like the little events that are occurring that show, that follow that driver. So if the pandemic is a driver, then work from home is a signal. And the idea that people are living more in a 24/7 modality is a signal. So to answer your question, when we were looking at all of the signals of what's happening because of the pandemic, one of the things that we were seeing is there's a lot of conversation about antimicrobial surfaces. People are talking about different systems going into the HVAC system, different lighting that's using infrared to kill bacteria. So what's funny about the pandemic is we're calling it the great accelerator, because a lot of these things were already happening. They were going at a much slower pace. And so we are definitely going to see, I think, the thing that we're talking about is our lobby spaces are going to become a different breed than what they are right now. They may be thought of as more of like a place to kind of stop people and hold them in a liminal space until they go to like that meeting that they're meeting with somebody, or if they're waiting for a different group. I think they're going to become much more of a space that is an active work area too. So that way there can be thought about, like, if you need to separate that space off from the rest of the population, that could be used as a separator in times of future pandemics. I definitely think you're going to see much more data monitoring and tracking that's going to allow for people to understand where people are, and then maybe what some of their medical issues are, which there's a bunch of big brother things that come up with that kind of thing. But I definitely think that, so bipolar ionization is one of the things that we talk about for our HVAC systems. And it's, something that's not too costly. And so I think it's going to be something that may be something we implement for our projects going forward, because it helps to clean the HVAC system from recirculating bacteria and viruses within the built environment. So there's definitely going to be changes to that. The other part of that is similar to what we were talking about in terms of, spaces being taken over by different uses. So we call that, the pivot. A lot of companies had to pivot their businesses because of needed to create something that they could have a product that they could sell. So we were seeing breweries that were taking their normal processes and turning it so that they could make hand sanitizer. So I think you're going to see a lot of companies that had to go dark, like our retail spaces that had to become like dark stores or fulfillment centers, having that second modality or that pivot capability that allows them to shift so that if there are other times of future stress or fragility, that they can make sure that they can still thrive and survive.
That's interesting. I had a friend who had a business. He was a tailor and suits, and he pivoted into masks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot more people who is figuring out that, okay, my side hustle can also be a profitable venture for myself in times of duress. Or here's that secondary offering, which actually then becomes part of my primary offering in the future. And then you can keep layering on the other things. So that way, again, we call it being anti-fragile here at MA, where we want to make sure that we thrive versus just having to pivot when something comes at us.
Interesting. So you were also, I was reading about, and it interests me about the wellness and mental health that you're an advocate for. And I would imagine that space and such is also associated with that, particularly now that people are working from home. Do you have anything that you'd like to comment on that aspect?
Yes, I think, there was a lot of things that happened with the pandemic, and I don't want to, downplay anything, but I think one of the great things that happened because of the pandemic is the ability for us to have a conversation about mental health. And I think people are much more aware of my mental health and then the people around me, like what their mental health are, and being able to have that conversation. So I think that's one of the positives that came from the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we were doing research around respite and mindfulness and resiliency, and how that can make you a more productive worker. So we developed a prototype called the Respite Room, where it's all designed using evidence-based design principles. So principles that are research that actually have been done through studies that say, curved spaces cause more anxiety, or rectilinear points cause more anxiety versus a curved wall would be much more pleasing and calming to the mind. Or colors is the one that people are usually very familiar with, that like some colors are more calming than other colors. And so we took all those principles and we created this respite room that can actually calm your central nervous system down from the state of like a panic attack to its normative levels in under 30 minutes. And so we were starting to implement that across all of our workplace practices or projects. And then we actually developed a workplace stressor survey that we were getting ready to launch right before the pandemic, so we could identify what stressors were in place in the workplace to make sure that we implemented the right activations in the respite room to solve for what the population was needing in that workplace environment. And of course, with the pandemic, it's all changed now, so that's gone on hold. But I still think people are much more aware of their mental health, and so I think they're wanting the calming spaces. I think people are doing and trying new things, whether it's physical activity or whether it's reading a book or developing that side hustle. A lot of people's needs are different. Like we talked about, neurodiversity, which can be as simple as introvert versus extrovert and what those needs differentials look like. And so I think because of it, our spaces are going to be much more attuned and flexible that are going to allow people to have calming moments. One of our corporate social responsibility partners is A Kid Again, which is a wonderful national organization that helps children and families who are living with diseases that can have an adventure. And, one of the things that we've talked about with them is like, how can we make better restrooms? Because, a lot of times these families have kids that, the restrooms just don't suit their needs. They may have to like lay the child or the individual down on the floor because they are a 13 or 14-year-old child who has a disability that, a normal changing station in a restroom wouldn't accommodate for. And so, when we think about having spaces that accommodate all and that allow for true accessibility, I think that blends into that mental health component where allowing people to have spaces that allows them to have a safe space is also part of accessibility too.
I remember back in the late 90s, there was a trend we saw in a lot of office buildings or a lot of companies. they had, for lack of a better term, let's call it a stress room. So if you were stressed, you could go in this room. Excuse me, it had recliners, it had soft music, low lighting for people that were stressed to go in there and kind of regroup themselves. And I retired in 2017, but I saw that as a continuing trend.
Mm-hmm.
And is that evolving more now?
It is, and I think where that also started to bring up were things like mother's rooms and phone rooms, so, and our respite room is completely different from that. And our respite rooms have very much historical based precedent to it. So like you're talking about those kind of like calming rooms. So it's definitely the progression to our, where we're taking our respite room, because like a mother's room is meant to go and be a place where obviously like a mother could nurse. A phone room is a place where if you're working in the open office environment, you're able to go and take a personal phone call. So you don't feel like you're on display, or if you need to share personal information, your person next to you could hear you. The respite room is really meant for you to take a break. We've developed an entire program that educates companies on why it's important to take a break. And a lot of it, is because people need better productivity. Studies actually show those all-nighters that we probably all took and did in college are not good for our brains. They're really bad for us. We don't make our best decisions at that point. And so just by being able to take a 15-minute break makes you much more productive throughout the day, makes you much more ready to deal with those things that may come at you when you have to make high stress decisions. So it's definitely that evolution from that 1990s calming room you were talking about, Roy.
Yeah. So how is the ADA coming now? Is it better or is it worse? 'Cause we've talked to some people and they're not happy with the ADA, and then others, they are. So from the architect standpoint, what are you seeing?
So here's what I would say. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the legislation that's passed at its time has the best of intent and is truly, a start for what accessibility means. In my opinion, it is by no way the upper echelon to reach for. It is something that we start as a benchmark and then we shoot beyond for. Because so we did South by Southwest virtually just this last week, and the number of seminars that were there that were talking about accessibility blew my mind. And it was actually really exciting because they're talking about accessibility in different ways. They're talking about it virtually as well as physically too. They're talking about how closed captions, which was developed in the 1970s, actually doesn't work, when you're playing video games. And so I think you take that and then you parallel that with like what we need to do in the physical environment. And I think it's, places where we want to push to allow for people who have all kinds of disabilities, whether they're physical, mental, whatever the case may be, can feel, heard. And so one of the things that we're working on is to making sure that all of our workplace projects, we have these surveys that we put out. We make sure that we are understanding their neurodiverse spectrum, we understand their accessibility spectrum, and then we understand their personal needs too, so that we try to get that comprehensive picture. So I would say I'm hopeful that a lot of the virtual developments are going to push new ADA legislation, as well as then include some of the other groups that were not included as part of the ADA when it was all set.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is it's kind of like the baseline, the minimum.
Correct.
And hopefully it's going to get better than just the minimum.
Yeah, I think that's, again, pandemic wise, I think we've all come to understand, humanity and seeing other people and being a little bit more tolerant and understanding of people. At least I hope that's my little zeitgeist bias that I have with it. But I think that with the pandemic, we realized that we can do better and we should do better, because we've now seen, what it feels like to be more oppressed.
Yeah. Well, I noticed right before I retired, there was a lot more open concept in design in office buildings. There was a lot more color.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, curved shapes, not just square boxes, rectangles, and all that. You had daylight harvesting, just a lot of things. And, because, and you mentioned a while ago, infrared
Mhm.
was, then, for
Infrared lighting, yep.
yeah. And so I know there's a lot of changes in lighting. It's way different than when I first started, but all those things. And I think in talking to people, two things that people always told us: they liked the open concept, but at the same time they wanted privacy too.
Yep.
So like you mentioned, that room where you could go make a personal phone call, that would be great. But I think in COVID, I think people not being together, that's really affected them, because I have one of my sons worked from home, but he went to the office before COVID. Once a week they would go into the office, and he said that that really made working home a lot better, because he got to go in, have that interaction, people,
Yep.
and he misses that whenever COVID hit.
Well, and I think the opportunity also lies in the fact that, our community has needs too. The places where our offices are places where our communities can be served, where we could have flexible spaces that, we talked about pivot spaces, where offices, if they are more 24/7, they could have a pop-up retail operating, in the evening time, and then it is an office during the day. Or, maybe it's opened up to the local like YMCA for people to go and be able to use the training facilities. I think that's the other thing that we're talking about with our clients and working with them, is that, when we understand their values and their goals and who they're trying to support, that allows us to understand, okay, what are the other activities, amenities we should be offering, so that it can be open up to the community and it, again, aligns with their values. I think that's the big thing, so that it's just something that everybody can be proud of and believe in, and it's showing their mission.
It's interesting because, if you think, or people that don't know, they think, all right, I want to build this building. So they go to an architect and they go, I want to build this building. It needs to have this, 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 and this, and, but then you go into your part. But what I'm hearing you say is, I come in and I say, Mark, I want to build this building. It needs to be this big. We got this many employees. This is what we do. Instead of you saying, okay, you need so many square feet, so many stories, blah, 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 then you're going a bit deeper into what's your company philosophy. Who are you trying to serve? You're going in more than just how many square feet do you need?
Absolutely. So for our process, we'll have clients come to us and say, okay, I've got X number of employees. I need to plan for this many future employees. And so how much space do I need? And it's something where that's sometimes the limit of what we get to. But what we try to actually do is we do these deep dive sessions where we do some observational research, where we get to come and watch your employees and how they interact with each other. We do discovery sessions and visioning sessions with them, where we talk about what are the core values and where's their alignment. We use the foresight services, for my Certified Futurist services, where we can help them pre-experience that future space, and then we can ask like polarizing questions about it, of like, is it 100% virtual, or is it 100% in person? And then we have discussions around that. And what comes out of it is we create these creative briefs and these stories that align with the company's missions and their core values, that become the way that they can attract and retain other employees and actually make their employees more productive, more engaged, and just happier. Happier employees are actually the ones you want to keep. I think there was a statistic that I heard that for every employee turnover, it's something like $10,000 to onboard the next employee. And so if you think about that and the capital that people can lose in this quick-paced gig economy that we're living in, that's a lot of money. And so they want to make sure their spaces support them and support the mission, and tell their story, as too.
I was just sort of thinking about one of the jobs that I had, and it was very short-lived. I think I was there for about 3 months, but they were really high security. So you couldn't leave the building except for, the hour at lunch, but there was no break. It's like you could take a break, but you couldn't go out. And the biggest thing is, you would have been wonderful for that one to say, like, we just had a little, kitchen place with not comfortable seats. If you're going to force your employees to stay in, then I would think maybe a place where there were couches where you could even read for the 15 minutes or whatever the case would have been better.
Right.
It was stressful because they're watching you as well, because it was high security. So they're watching you on every camera, which is fine. I get that. But it was that feeling of really, you almost felt like an inmate.
But think about that, what they're communicating psychologically to their employees. We care more about what you do than who you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to resonate well with our younger generations. Our millennials and our Gen Zers, that's not how they operate. They operate very much with their own values, and they're shopping, with the values that they align with. They're going to work for employees that they align with. They're going to expect you to have a give back program. They're going to expect you to know what your story and your mission is. And that's the reason that they're going to choose you over another company. And so if you really want to think about getting the best, new, brightest talent, you can't have a place that psychologically not demeans you, but like oppresses you in a way that like you're talking about.
Yeah, I ended up with severe anxiety after I left there. Literally, I did. And it took me a little while to get over that, but it just did something to I was probably teetering already. I was like, was the straw of the camel's back.
It's funny because of all the places I worked in, the lawyers' offices, surprisingly, when they did those, they always had their employees in mind. I mean, they had nice kitchens. They had all these, cappuccino machine. I mean, all this stuff for their employees, which to me I wouldn't have thought that would be a lawyer's office, but they always made sure they had very, very nice employee accommodations in every law office I ever worked in.
Yeah, it's really funny. Lawyer offices have come through a renaissance recently where they used to be very formal and very kind of like, we want to show our magnitude and our wealth in a way and our power in a certain way, to now they have a lot more fun. At least some of them do.
Yeah.
Because they also recognize that, yes, we have a serious profession and we have a serious job that we want to do, but we also, again, care about our people. I think the care of others, is something that is just a vibrant thread of connectivity that we're seeing in a lot of the trends that we're talking about.
Mark, how can our people reach out to you?
So our website is up and running. You can visit our website at ma-architects.com. And you can find me on there. You can email me, hopefully I can give you my email address. You can provide it on the podcast link in here, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a conversation and have new people to reach out to me too.
Okay.
If you're looking to figure out, build some alignment in your leadership, if you're looking to kind of figure out what your preferred future looks like, reach out to me. And that's awesome. Another way that I'm happy to provide some answers and see what we can discuss.
Oh, great.
Beautiful. Really
Did you have
appreciate
anything, Loriette?
Sorry?
Did you have anything else?
I did not. I just found this so fascinating. I do have other things, but it would take another hour to be able to go through it. So I thought I'd better stop now.
Part 2. That'll be part 2 later on.
Yeah. We'll definitely like to have you come back sometime, for sure.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Mark, thanks for taking the time to be with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.
Thanks.